Hello, welcome everyone. We are so glad you're here as we'll take about 30 seconds to a minute to let everyone get logged in or logged on, and we won't take too much time so we can let Renee really have the most of the hour. So we'll just let everybody trickle in and get on. So couple housekeeping business items while everyone's getting settled. If you look at your screen, there should be a place for you at the bottom to put questions, because Renee will be answering questions for the last 15 minutes of the hour. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And if you see someone that has asked a question that either you were going to ask or that you really connect to, you can upvote that. And the questions that get upvoted the most will go to the top. I think that's all of the business keeping items that I have for you right now. So let's make haste. Welcome everyone. My name is Amy Lerman. I'm a speech language pathologist and I am community outreach for the Parish School. And on behalf of the Parish School, I am so honored and excited to welcome a mentor of mine, Renee Attaway-Storer. Renee is a certified speech language pathologist and she is the founder of the social learning program at the Parish School. Renee spent over 20 years of her career on our campus, and she currently has a private practice where she runs social groups for elementary, middle, and high school age children, as well as adults. In addition to her private practice, Renee is a member of the Social Thinking Training and Speakers Collaborative, where she travels the country speaking and giving trainings to professionals and parents. This evening, Renee will be speaking with us about resilience, which is arguably one of the most important traits that we can instill in children. Resilience lays a foundation for success by imbuing confidence, optimism, and strength. Renee, we are so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Resilience is a topic that is so near and dear to my heart. It's played a huge role in my life, and these students that I've worked with for many years, as Amy mentioned, I've been at Parish School for 20 years, and I've gotten to watch kids grow up from early preschool years or early elementary all the way up into high school and now into adulthood. So I feel like resilience is a topic that is so critical in our children's development, and to help these students that have special needs or any sort of challenges be as successful as possible in their life. So I'm going to go ahead now and share my PowerPoint so you guys can all see it. And we'll get started. So, all right, hold on. And one last thing, let me just put present. One moment, I'm so sorry. I feel like I just lost my present button. Here it is. Okay. All right, so here we go. So resilience, as I mentioned, was something that I am so passionate about. There are several factors that have been identified as critical for adulthood, but it really comes down to two, one of which is social competence. Social competence is really what I speak about the most because I'm a speaker for social thinking and passionate about social thinking. And it is a huge factor in success for adulthood. In fact, Google just did a study study of successful employees, and they identified 10 traits that help you to be a successful Google employee, and 7 of those were related to social competence. So unfortunately today we're not talking about social competence. We have many talks at Parish you can attend for that, but today I want to focus on one of the other factors. In fact, every successful adult has this factor, and it's resilience. Whether you're at school, in the classroom, at a job setting, in the military academy, or in competitions, researchers have identified that the people who come out on top and who complete the task are resilient. They have resilience and grit. And those two are very interrelated. Today, we're going to mostly talk about grit, and everything I'm going to share with you to help your children become more resilient will also increase how gritty they are. What's interesting about this is researchers have found that grit and resilience predict success in adulthood more than IQ, talent, grades, economic background, or many other factors. And that's pretty exciting and scary, to be honest. In fact, there's so many headlines that you can find as you're researching this. This one was particularly interesting to me. Many high schools and colleges especially are talking about how children today are less resilient than ever before. In this particular article, they were discussing how counseling referrals or students seeking counseling has more than doubled. And what they're seeking counseling for are smaller and smaller problems. And in fact, one particular example were two students that sought trauma counseling because they saw a mouse in their dorm. And this baffled the faculty at this college because they just thought, well, that's such a small problem. Why can't they just get over it? But the fact is, resilience is declining. So let's talk about what it looks like to have a lack of resilience. And many of our children do lack resilience for many reasons, but what this would look like is overreactions when small problems happen. So the problem shouldn't be that big, but the student's reaction is so much bigger than you expect. For example, I had a student who had many talents, but unfortunately had lost a pink sock at camp one year and cried for a day and a half. I've had another student who was bullied at the age of 12, and a true bullying situation. She was received counseling. Her parents were on it. She received all of the help that anyone could provide. But unfortunately, at the age of 16 and 17, she still brings up, when I'm working with her, this event that happened when she was 12. And it wasn't that traumatic of an event. It was a boy who was mean to her in a class. That event stayed with her for the rest of her life. Every week she would bring it up. She just could not move past it. And we see that so often with our adults and our high schoolers if they don't show resilience factors. Some other factors or things you would see that would show a lack of resilience would be I already mentioned that one, relying on adults to solve their problems and tell them what to do. This is particularly challenging in the adult program I work in. These adults walk in and they're used to adults solving their problems, telling them when to act, what to do. And so they really become helpless. You see frequent tantrums. That's a sign of a resilience lack. Giving up too easily. Students who try something, if they find it's hard, they just give up. Students who fear failure. And they avoid trying because they know the task will be hard and they're just not sure that they can be successful. Becoming helpless, students who blame others when things go wrong. This is actually very common. Something I see quite a bit in our adults is they run into challenges and instead of looking for what they can change, they immediately blame the situation, other people, anything they can for the challenge they're having. And then the final one would be students who lack initiative. They show a lack of resilience as well. So let's define what resilience is. For our purposes today, we're going to call it resilience is the process of adapting that's really important, in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, significant sources of stress, and really it's about bouncing back, no matter what the situation is. And I don't want to underscore the trauma or the stress that this child might be under. These are real. All of these are real and serious. So we're not underscoring these aren't small problems, but resilience is no matter what life throws at you, overcoming it, right? Bouncing back no matter what. I love this quote. I had found this years ago, but resilience is that inevitable quality that allows some people to be knocked down by life and come back stronger than ever. And it's this idea of like rising from the ashes, that no matter how bad life comes, no matter what life throws at you, you can come back. And so that's something that's really important. This is really where resilience started. It was research done by Dr. Norman Herman, and he was working with students who were in very, very dire situations in their home life, with economics, with abuse, with trauma. And he was studying these students and working on ways to improve their life and their success. And what he found is there was this one boy that stood out to him. And this boy walked in every single day with 2 slices of bread and nothing between them. And, that's pretty sad. Norman Garmanzi knew that this boy had no money and there was no one to make the sandwich for him because of the situation at home. And yet he walked in every day with a smile. He had told people he did not want anyone to pity him, that he was okay and that he was going to make it. And this kid adapted well. He had great pro-social behaviors. He just seemed to shine in spite of his circumstances. And Dr. Norman Garmanzi found this really interesting. And so he started researching these different groups. And what he found is that children are usually divided into 3 groups. One group of children that just succeed. They even excel even in the midst of terrible circumstances. And then there's another group that actually don't succeed well in schooling. They struggle, they really, really run into so many challenges in childhood, but then suddenly they walk into adulthood and they shine, they pull it together, they're successful. And then there's a third group that just never seem to pull it together. They succumb to their circumstances and they don't find a way out, really. And I think if you think about your life right now and the people you know in your life, yourself, your family, friends, and you start looking at people you know that fall into all 3 of those categories. I know people in my own personal life. I can think of which category I'm in. But it's interesting because the question is why? Because they've leveled out and they've matched up economic background, trauma, divorce in their family, abuse, all of these factors, grades. And yet they're finding that despite all of that, kids fall into these 3 categories, and those factors don't predict the category. So as this research began and people started looking into it, they found out so much more about resilience, and there's so many more ideas about how to build a child's resilience regardless of what they were born with. So today I want you to think, though, about our children with special needs. This topic, again, was a personal interest to me, but honestly, it was also a professional interest for me. I have students who have special needs. I work with clients. I teach social thinking, as you know, but I have clients who are not set up to be extremely resilient based on the challenges in their life. And some of these challenges that really cause our kids with special needs to be at risk for a lack of resilience would be social challenges, right? They struggle to share space and interact with others. They struggle to get people to support them sometimes. Weak problem-solving abilities. So much of being resilient relies on problem solving. But these kids don't know how to problem solve. They have really concrete thinking, so that they struggle to be flexible enough to problem solve and to think abstractly. They struggle to know how to do it. They struggle to manage their own emotions around that. They struggle with initiation, so starting a task or to solve a problem or to reach a goal. And cognitive flexibility, which really means you have to be flexible to find a solution, right? You have to be flexible to change when you've encountered an obstacle to try something else. And these students, this is hard for their brain already. So this sort of stacks the deck against them in a way. Perspective taking challenges is another challenge for them. So they don't think about other people's thoughts and feelings and motives very well. And then the other one that really causes them challenges would be self-regulation and executive functioning. They struggle to regulate their body and their words and their actions in order to reach goals. So the good news, though, is that's not the end, because that feels very depressing and sad and hard. But the good news with all of this is because of the research that's been done and because what we know is no matter what the stressors of your life are, you can outweigh them with positive traits, and it's all a balance. So if the positive traits, and especially positive traits of resilience, outweigh the stressors in your life, you can succeed no matter what. So, and this is something you probably can understand in your own life. I know for me, when I am overwhelmed and stressed and losing it, I have to do things that are healthy for myself to outweigh the stressors in my life. If I'm not seeking positivity, for example, if I'm not giving myself space to think, I'm probably going to be overwhelmed by my stressors. And so it's a balance. There's no magic formula for resilience and grit, although I wish there was. But there are factors that we can work to improve and to make a difference with. The first one is sort of the tough one. This is personality biology. This one's luck. Some kids are born more resilient, and you know that as parents because you probably can look at your multiple children in your home and tell which kid is more resilient at birth, right? We all have those students who no matter what seem to, or those children who no matter what seem to shine and just move on and do great. And then we have the other student or child that falls down more, right? So we know this. The good news is that's not the end of the discussion. Other things or factors that can really build resilience in our children are positive adult-child relationships. Putting mentors in their life makes a huge difference. I'm not going to talk about this today, but this is a huge factor. So the more positive adults in their life, the more resilient they're likely to be. An internal locus of control, which we're going to talk about, and this basically means, do you believe you have control over your life? Trauma versus challenge, which means if you see it as a challenge versus a trauma, you are more resilient. Mindset, so obviously a positive mindset can make all the difference in helping you to have a resilient mindset. And then self-regulation and problem solving, you have to be a good problem solver. So teaching our children how to be better problem solvers, even if their brain makes it difficult, is a huge piece of the puzzle in building more resilience in our children. And then finally, social competence, which is one of my favorite things to talk about if you know me at all. But today I'm not going to focus on that. However, I am going to send you to socialthinking.com. I am going to talk today about some problem solving that will be a part of social thinking, but I do want you to check out that website. I'm going to share later in the talk a webinar that I think would be so beneficial to you guys, but definitely check out that. There's a lot of e-learning and webinars and so much good information. So the question you're waiting for is, how do I help my child show more resilience, right? No matter what's stacked against them, how do we build this? And before I say that, I wanted to say too, as I was writing this talk, I was thinking a lot about my clients. I actually am very blessed to have several high schoolers and actually 2 adults I work with who I have known since preschool at the Parish School or early elementary. And these kids have, you know, taught me so much over the years, and they've been kids that obviously I care about deeply. But I'm going to give you 2 examples, and I'm going to name one of them Susan. We're going to name the other one Sarah. So, and these are current girls, of course, I changed their name. Susan actually has quite challenging perspective taking. Her perspective taking is weak. She struggles to figure out other people's thoughts and motives and feelings in the moment at all. Even after the moment, it really is tough for her. She is not a great abstract thinker. She's incredibly concrete. Problem solving is incredibly difficult for her. She cannot read other people's motives. She has quite a few social learning challenges. She has struggled to read. She's now at the point where she can read quite well, but her reading comprehension is not great. So obviously the odds are against her on some of this, but she is probably one of the most resilient kids I've ever met. In spite of her challenges, she does well. She blends at school. She never gives up. She continues to fight for this. And she's made more progress than I believed possible, to be honest. And she has blown everybody out of the water. Things that you didn't think she could do, she has achieved. Whereas we have another student who actually has, and we'll call her Sarah. Sarah actually has a little higher I would say perspective taking. She actually, I would say can think somewhat abstractly, but she's still pretty concrete thinking. Her reading has been great from the beginning. She's always read. She has no problems reading comprehension. She can fall a bit, but she's a pretty competent girl, but she is not as resilient. And so what we see is she falls apart faster. She struggles to keep going. She struggles to just to endure. And so as I've watched their progress over the years, I can see how resilience has made all the difference for these kids. And so this is part of the talk. So today I'm going to break it down into 4 areas that you can just work to improve. I'm going to throw some ideas at you. This is not a long talk. So I'm going to give you some ideas. Please feel free to take a picture of the slide if there's something that you want to remember. I believe you're getting a copy of this talk emailed to you, so feel free to go back also and look at these slides if you want to recall some of this. But I'm going to run through it. And we have a great amount of time, so we should be great. So the first thing that will really make a difference with your child's resilience is called internal locus control. So as you can see on the slide here, we have a C-. And let's say that a kid gets a C- and they care. They do care, it bothers them. They wanted a better grade. There are 2 kinds of locus of control, external and internal. So external locus of control would immediately blame the C on their teacher. Well, the teacher didn't help them enough. The teacher didn't give them the right material. The teacher didn't tell them what was on the test. It's not their fault because they did as well as they could. They wait for their parents to tell them what to do. Maybe they even avoid telling their parents because they don't really know what to do with this problem. They chalk it up to there's no hope, and maybe they'll even say something along the lines of, well, I'm not a language arts person. This is not something I'm good. Maybe this paper is physics. I don't know. Whatever the subject is, that's not their thing. And so that's the external locus of control. They believe that they're a victim of their circumstances, that it's everybody else's fault. There's not much they can do. They were born with these abilities and this intelligence, and that's sort of it. The internal locus of control student will look at this and go, wow, that was not the grade I wanted. And they'll start saying things like, what do I need to do differently? Maybe next time I should study more, or gosh, I don't understand why I didn't get this. I think I need to set up a meeting with my teacher to figure out what I can do better. They might tell their parents, hey, I think I need a tutor. Like I thought I had this, but I don't. They will see this as a challenge and they'll work to get better. They'll see it as, okay, what can I do? Rather than, well, this just happened to me. There's not much I can do. They have more self-esteem, more self-confidence. They see themselves as the makers of the change in their own life. So another way to look at it is resilient children are the orchestrator of their own fate. They believe that they can change their circumstances and solve problems and not fall at the whim of circumstances. And I love the way this is summed up here. Things happen to me versus I make things happen. This alone is crucial for your children. They have to believe that they can make changes. And this starts in toddlers, like very, very early. As soon as language is beginning, this is something we have to cultivate in our children. And I'll show you how in just a sec. The hallmark of resilience, by the way, is what can I do differently? This is the thing. All resilient people say this in their own brain. Okay, well, this happened, so what can I do differently? Someone wouldn't be my friend. Now, what can I do differently? The teacher doesn't like me. What can I do differently? This person is mean to me. What can I do differently? And so they're always asking this question, trying to figure out how to change the situation, right? No matter how bad it is. They're always trying to figure out what they can do. And they believe they can change their circumstances. So as parents, what can you do for your children to encourage this? Well, number one, ask the question, what can you do differently? It's not a we thing, it's a kid, it's their thing, right? So we want to pass ownership of these problems to our children. That does not mean you step out of it. That does not mean you don't help, but it means that you're now allowing them to be the orchestrators of their own fate, to begin to control some of the world around them. We ask constantly, what is your plan? And this can start as young as toddlers. Like let's say your toddler spills milk or your preschooler. Starting this dialogue around, oh no, a problem has happened. We've spilled milk. What can we do? Or what can you do, right? What is your plan? And so really working on helping the student or the child or the toddler have some idea of what they can do. And so toss around ideas. Don't run yourself to go get the paper towel to clean it up because dear Lord, it's on your floor. Think about how you can help your child become a problem solver. And so at that point, toss around some ideas, help them if they can't come up with any. And then maybe they say, I can get a paper towel. Great. Let them go get the paper towel, help hand it to them and let them start cleaning. And you can help them, but you want them to be able to take some control of that situation. The other thing, I just said it, but stop using the word we as much. We tend to do this quite often with our kids because we feel it's our problem to solve, and we need to help our children to realize that they can solve problems. And this is scary, parents, without you. Because we make our students so dependent on ourselves, or we make our children so dependent on ourselves, because that's what we do as parents. But I'm looking at the adult world now, where I have adults that cannot achieve independence because they're still so dependent on their parents. So this is something you can cultivate young. This will kill you by giving them space to try and fail. As parents, we hate to watch our kids fail. It is one of the worst things ever, but your child has to experience failure at home. They've got to experience failure with grades or with people around them or situations so that they can learn. Failure is never the end. It's a learning opportunity. And stop doing it for them. You've got to stop solving their problems. I know parents that actually do their kids' homework because they're so terrified for their kids not to get a great grade. And the problem is you cannot go through life. I actually, speaking of that, I know a parent who actually went to college with their kid and helped their child get a master's degree. And I mean help because this parent took a heavy role in helping write the papers and all that. Best intentions in the world, but unfortunately, they now have an adult that can't get a job. So it's so important. And I know that's an extreme example, but we have to allow our students to experience failure and to experience success too. Free unstructured play by far is one of the best things you can ever do for your child. This is where they learn to negotiate and problem solve and experience failure. The more you can back out of their play and not structure it, the better. The more you can give them open-ended play. In fact, at Parish, we have something called adventure play, which, by the way, is the very best example of unstructured play out there. So as much as you can do this, this is huge. And then this is something I've kind of said, but I want to say it again. Let them do as much as they can before you help. So for example, if you have a preschooler trying to put, or let's say a toddler, trying to put up on their own clothes, and they really can't get their socks on by themselves, well, then let them do the part they can. If they can only get it on their toes, great. Let them get on their toes. And we all know as moms and dads, that means you're going to go insane because it's going to take much longer than it possibly ever should. But we're going to have to wait and let them put on what they can. And then you help them with the rest. And then my advice is always to wait and let them do the very last part themselves, because I want them to know it was them, right? I did not have to help them the whole way, that they achieved something. And then the last thing on this one is teaching them they have a choice and they can change the outcome. So from a very early age, all the way up through middle school, adulthood, is what do you think we should do? Your choice is this or this. And I see parents using this even as far as high school on, okay, well, we're looking at your schedule right now. You could take this or you could take this. Which one do you think? And making sure they have a choice about their life. So next area that we can work on and help our kids grow in is the trauma or challenge area. So this is helping our students see things as a challenge, not a trauma. And I put the visual of a roadblock here because I think what happens for our students is they see things as roadblocks and they don't know what to do with it. They look at it as, well, that's it. I tried, but it didn't happen. I hit the roadblock. There's nothing I can do now. And the fact is, there are things you can do. You can turn around and try to find a different way. We want our children to see the problems of their life as challenges. We want them to go, hey, I can always do something. I can try something. And it's all in how you frame it, really, right? If as parents, we're framing it as, wow, that stinks that happened, but what are we going to try? What can you do differently, right? So then passing it back to them, and know that you'll be there to support them. You're never going to leave them by themselves, but you are going to allow them to start figuring out ways. And I'll teach this later, but I want to say it here. It's also about teaching students, especially our kids that are very detailed thinking and very concrete learners. They struggle because they can't even see the big picture. The big picture gets so overwhelming for them. And so for those students, helping them see what are the small steps they have control over, right? For instance, I was working with my own child on someone said something really awful to them. And, you know, he was quite devastated, to be honest with you. And so what I was working with him on is, okay, so this happened. You can't change what happened. What can you change? And he was like, well, I can change my reaction. And I was like, that's all you can change right now. That's where you can control this. You change how you respond, and that's your power. And so teaching him to walk away or to say whatever, or stand up for himself. There are things he can do in the situation. He is not a victim ever. So if you see obstacles and problems as a challenge, you will overcome. If you see them as a trauma, then the tough part is this becomes an everlasting problem. And everyone in this talk can tell people in their life that has seen things that have happened to them as a trauma and they've never really gotten over it. And just like my girl that at 12, she was bullied, but every session she brought it up at the ages of 16 and 17, she never moved past it. Or I've had students who teacher doesn't like them. Therefore, there's no hope, right? There's nothing they can do. Oh, well. And they don't see that actually there's so much you can do, because for them, it's sort of over at that point. And so we want to help them to see that differently. So on some examples for how to help our students see problems as a challenge, number one, focus a little less on how your child feels and more what they can do. Now, don't hear me say ever that you shouldn't care about how your kid feels, because that's not what I said. You should always say something along the lines of, wow, I can see you're sad, or what are you feeling right now? Why don't you tell me about it? And so, because I want kids to identify their feelings, I want them to be able to talk about how they're sad or they're anxious or they're worried. That is 100% okay. What happens in my experience is that parents, because they're so overwhelmed by their child's feelings, or their child feels it so enormously, they become stuck on it as much as the kid. Then we just get stuck talking about how sad they are, how mad they are, how much they're hurting. And we don't move on to, okay, now what do we do with this? How do we avoid this situation happening again? How can I change this situation to work out well for me? But I've got to do something. So again, focus on your kids' feelings, but don't get stuck there. Helping them, I mentioned this earlier, helping them break down the solution to small steps. Here, like, for example, this is a sort of a silly one, but let's say their friend that was their friend won't play with them right now, right? That's pretty abstract. So talking about, okay, what's going on? What are they thinking? How are you feeling about it? Okay, what are some ideas that we can try, that you can try? See, I said we again, that you can try, and then breaking it down to little tiny things. And I'll give you one quick example to help this come alive. I was working with a student who actually has pretty horrific social anxiety. She is 16. And she really is not at a point to where she can just walk up and start talking to people. It feels incredibly horrible to her. So she knows that's her end goal, but she's not there yet. And so what I'm working with her on is, what are the tiny, tiny changes you can make to get people to talk to you, or to include you, or to notice you. And maybe that very small change for her, or that small step, is to smile at people and to be a little more approachable. And that's something she can control and she can work on right now. Her anxiety is not going anywhere right now, obviously, and she'll live with it the rest of her life, but she can do something to deal with it. And you know, this one's tough. I do want to mention this too, because I work with kids all the time. They're like, well, I have anxiety. There's just nothing I can do about that. Or one of my favorite kids ever, I was working with conversation and trying to teach him some concepts around conversation. And he looked at me and he said, I just can't. And I said, why can't you? And he said, well, it's because of the autism. And I said, excuse me? And he said, it's because I have the autism. I can't do conversation. And he had become this very fixed mindset around this. And I said, well, actually, your autism is a challenge. Yes, your brain makes this hard, but the great news is you can always get better at this. You can always do something to improve it. And to, especially in the area of conversation, you can always do something different. And so trying to teach him, hey, your autism is not the end, right? Your autism is not a roadblock for you. It's actually just teaches you to go down different paths. A couple other things you can do are praise effort and persistence. Research is very clear that when you praise kids' outcomes, like their grades or how beautiful their picture is, instead of how hard you worked and the effort you put into something, it actually tends to stop their progress and achievement. And this is something, Ellen Galinsky is a great person to read about this. So praising effort and process for students and your children is so huge in helping them to achieve. I put a couple other ones on here. Choices we've talked about, allow struggle and frustration. And then last one, don't kill me, but boredom is a great thing. The more kids are bored, the more they're creative, the more they start problem solving. And this is just a quick frame. You might take a picture of this. When your children are having problems, helping them fill out this framework. So, or say it out loud. The problem is, I can try to solve it by doing this. And if I need help, here's what I will do. I'll go ask the teacher. I'll talk to you. So finding ways to begin this framework of something they just embed into their own thinking. So, okay, one of our last ones, we're going to do two more. Building a positive mindset. I've already sort of alluded to growth mindset versus fixed mindset. When I was talking about the boy who had the autism and could not do conversation, I have students who, when they're criticized, completely fall apart, because they can't take feedback that's negative. They believe that that means they're a total failure. They believe their IQ is fixed and their talents are fixed, and that's just the way they are. And I hear things like that, all of the time. I'm just not social. I'm just not a math person. And they don't see it as, you know what, you can always get better. And I'll have them do their strengths and weaknesses quite often. And one of the things I'll ask is, because I have kids all the time tell me, well, I won't get better at social. This is something that's always been hard for me. And so I'll say, well, I'm awful at sports. Do you think I could get better? And then all of them, especially the ones that are very into sports, are like, yes, you could get a coach. You could start working on your pitching or your shooting or whatever it is. And if you practice all the time, you might get better. And that's true, because I could get better. I'm not motivated to on sports, but I could. So growth mindset, again, is challenges help me grow. Failure is an opportunity. I try new things. And fixed mindset, of course, is the opposite. Failure is the limit. I give up when I'm frustrated. I stick to what I know. So we have to teach our students the power of the brain. The brain allows us to grow and change and try new things, and we are always evolving. In fact, even as late as all the way through our life, we grow and change. I bet none of you are the person you were at 20 years old, right? We've all changed and evolved, and so will your children. So growth mindset is a big part of this. A couple other things I can't teach long about, but I wanted to throw out there is you got to teach them how the brain works. I love Dan Siegel's upstairs, downstairs brain. I think it's a wonderful analogy for our students in understanding the power of their frontal lobe in controlling their emotions and their impulses. Another part of it, as I mentioned, strengths and weaknesses. Talk about what their brain makes hard versus what their brain makes easy. I appreciate that kids need a diagnosis for services, and some kids need that to understand who they are. Parents need that to understand them. But in the end, we've got to understand what our kids' brain makes easy and what our kids' brains makes hard. And the fact is, they don't all have the same kinds of smarts. Some of them are better at Lego smarts. They have bigger Lego smarts than they do math smarts, or maybe they have really high math smarts but lower language arts smarts. A couple other things, make sure you talk about mistakes. Mistakes are not a bad thing. They are learning opportunities. As parents, we have to model for our kids that mistakes help you learn. And in our house, when kids make a mistake, I look at them and go, great, you made a mistake. It's a wonderful opportunity to learn. What'd you learn from it? And then we start talking about what'd you learn from that mistake. And then finally, self-talk changes the brain. Positive self-talk actually rewires the brain. So a couple of just examples I used. This is actually from Michelle Garcia Winner's Social Thinking, You Are a Social Detective, which starts out talking about smarts. So this is a great example. You can find this on socialthinking.com. This is Brain City, which I mentioned in the final part. And this is basically towers for what your brain makes easy are the tall towers, and then what your brain makes hard are those lower towers. And this is one of my favorite kids ever. But he wrote the very tall one over here on the left is his video game skills tower. His brain makes that very easy. He has a lot of video game smarts. This low one right over here that says doing homework, he has a very low doing homework smart. He doesn't have much of that in his brain. Reading is not a high smart for him. Movie making, however, lots of movie making smarts. Controlling temper had gotten bigger because we had worked on that. And so this is a great way to help your kids just develop. And then finally, mindset matters. We have to teach our kids they have an inner coach, because your kids likely are like mine, and they use a lot of inner critic, which is, I can't, it's too hard, I'm bad at this. I'm afraid I'll fail. It's too hard. I'm afraid, right? And so our kids get stuck in that when we need them to switch to use their inner coach, which is, I can do this. I can at least try. It's okay if I'm not perfect. I will do my best. It's not too hard for me. I've done it before, and I can do this part well, right? So it's helping remind our students, hey, what would your inner coach say? I've had actually students tell me their inner coach looked a lot like me, and they weren't happy with it, but that's what they heard in their head. Give them a character, whatever their character is. Some people say Inside Out Joy, the movie Inside Out, that became their inner coach. So whatever it looks like, but they've got to start hearing their inner coach, and that's called positive self-talk. All right, so last thing we're going to cover before I'm going to open for questions would be self-regulation and problem solving. I could talk about this, many of you know, if you know me, for about 6 hours, but today I'm going to talk about it for like 5 minutes. So self-regulation and problem solving obviously means inhibiting, doing something you should, even though that's not what you want to do, and then problem solving, right? Figuring out solutions to problems, choosing a solution, and then following up on it. So actually, problem solving, flexibility, and regulating your own emotions are huge parts of resilience. We have to teach our kids that little problems mean little reactions, regardless of your emotions. In fact, with high school students and adults, I start teaching them that your emotions do not determine the size of the problem. You may absolutely be so furious that someone didn't talk to you in the cafeteria, but that's probably a small problem and you can go on and solve that. Or possibly like breaking your pencil. That's a small problem, even if you're having an awful day. So being aware that there's a reaction that's expected for that size of the problem. And this is something we can work on with our students. We can help them. And we see this is something we focus on so strongly at Parish. And we see such differences with students who are focusing on how can I solve a problem. And, you know, for example, kids that want the certain bike and they don't get that bike, that feels like an enormous problem at that time, but it's expected to have a small reactions, especially depending on their age. When we're looking at a kindergartners are pretty dysregulated actually, but in the classroom, it's pretty amazing what they can pull together, and especially in a typical or mainstream setting and handle. And so we're looking at what's expected for the situation they're in and the age. And so what reaction would be expected? And for some reason, my thing just went on me. Okay, here we go. So this is a poster. I don't have time to, like I said, to talk about this as much as I want, but I want you to see this poster. It's something you can find in socialthinking.com. And on the left side, you see it says size of the problem. And then on the right, it says size of my reaction. So for instance, breaking my pencil would be a small problem. We expect that to be a small problem. If I start screaming and yelling and throwing the pencil around the room, I have now had a reaction that's much bigger than the size of the problem, which then actually results in a new problem because of how it changes everybody else's emotion. So I'm expected instead to have a small reaction, which might look like, oh gosh, okay, I'll get another pencil, right? Disappointment maybe. This is a webinar I would love for all of you to go watch. It's free and it's on the socialthinking.com website. This is Michelle Garcia Winter who created the approach, and I'm linking it here. Please take a picture or just go on the socialthinking.com website and just search size of the problem webinar and you will find it quickly. I'll give it just a second for you to look. All right, last couple of things. Self-regulation is something I had to throw in here because I said I'm working with adults and high schoolers. And I will tell you that it took me by surprise how important self-regulation was in adulthood. I thought it would just they would grow out of the problems. I thought that surely adults would not be impulsive and struggle to inhibit. But what I find is we have talented, bright, like quite bright IQ-wise, normal language skills, kids that have, or adults that have everything they need, you think, on paper to be successful, but they can't they can't get a job, they can't keep a job, they struggle to be independent. And most of the reason for that is self-regulation. This one it's a killer, I think is the only way I could possibly say that. So self-regulation challenges will actually derail your child's ability to learn in a group, show their potential, keep a job, or continue past high school. I have watched talented adults scream the F word at their workplace and end up fired because they have to regulate. That is such a critical skill and we don't realize how important. So it is so important that you focus on, as young as you can, starting in the toddler years, helping your kids wait. They have to be able to have delayed gratification. Talk to your therapy team about these things I'm talking about. They've got to focus on this if your child struggles with self-regulation. Inhibit doing what they shouldn't and do what they should. That's called stop and think in our world. Be flexible to do something else. Cognitive flexibility means I can find a different solution to a problem. That means I can move on when I'm stuck. Follow hidden rules. They've got to be able to blend into a group and they have to be able to recall strategies that can work for them. So those are things you can focus on now throughout their journey to help them be as self-regulated as possible. A couple other things when they're young to teach self-regulation. I love Sesame Street, their self-reg videos, especially the Cookie Monster weight video. It's awesome. Early learners, you want to teach them to negotiate as much as possible. So instead of just taking the toy they took from somebody else, hand it back to the person who had it originally and talk about, okay, what could you say if you want that toy? Well, you could say, I want a turn. And then the other kid's going to say no, because we know how kids are. So you're going to instead look at them and say, well, actually, you know, it's expected to share. How many minutes until he can have a turn? And that kid determines the minutes, unless they're the kid that throws out 100,000 minutes. And then I would give them a choice, 5 minutes or 3 minutes. And then the other child waits for 5 or 3 minutes, whatever was said, until it's their turn. So you're teaching that idea of inhibiting, waiting, and problem solving. The other big things: give less energy to big emotion moments. It's hard, and I will say I was really good at it at my job when I was teaching preschool, but I will say not as great at it as in parenting. But when my kids are losing their mind, if I talk softly and I'm, you know, in the middle of their crazy land, and I'm just quietly, you need to calm down, take a deep breath, I want you to understand what happened. You know, if I'm quiet and I'm incredibly calm, they calm down much, much faster. And this is a tried and true technique. I promise. I've tried it at the worst of moments, and it is so much more successful than if I lose my temper with them. So, and really giving less energy. I'm not going to try to reason with someone who's losing their mind at the moment. It just doesn't work. I'm going to let them calm, and then we will discuss. And even a toddler can plan and do something for themselves. Allow your toddler's choices. So just as we're getting to panel, I want to show you a couple of things. Dr. Robert Brooks is a pioneer in this area. I love his book, The Power of Resilience, and he has this website called The Agents of Change. Fantastic stuff. So definitely check this out. Angela Lee Duckworth, by the way, speaks about grit, and grit and resilience are heavily related. But I think her TED Talk is one of the most wonderful things I've ever watched. So Angela Lee Duckworth, and you can just go on TED Talk and or the TED.com and search grit. Phenomenal. Well worth your time. And then I'm going to leave this up for just a second. I know that there's questions coming, and I'm going to turn this over to you, Amy, if that works. Do you want me to quit sharing right now so you can start the question part?
Sure. So thank you, Renee. That was amazing. And folks, thank you so much for being with us. What we're going to do is we're going to let Renee look through the questions really quickly. And while she's doing so, I'm going to do a little commercial for our next adult education. Please mark your calendars, because on June 23rd at the same time, we will spend an amazing hour with Jennifer Woody. Jennifer Woody is an occupational therapist at the Parish School and the Caruth Center on the Parish School campus. What she will be covering on the 23rd of June is the meat and potatoes of feeding and eating. In other words, this is a really great talk for all of your picky eaters. So we're going to follow pretty much the same format that we did tonight. There'll be a way for us to go in and register. And once again, thank you, Renee. If you've had a few minutes to look everything over, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay. So the first question is, let's go, I think, oh, it turned around. Okay, when you give less energy to big emotion moments, is that a form of co-regulation? Yes, of course. And so the idea is that as parents, we have to stay regulated. And I understand the challenges. I think every person in this room that's a parent knows that is almost impossible. But when we are regulated, we model it for our children, and we allow them the opportunity to be regulated, right? If I'm yelling at my kid, I just increase the load of dysregulation that's happening in them. So the motion, and it's not perfect at all, but making sure that we keep ourselves as calm as possible helps our students regulate. Okay. So let's see, next one, what age can we start working with kids on these skills? So what's really incredible is the brain is wired for resilience. As long as, you know, the personality and all of those things happen that we hope, and all of these factors come to play. But what we know is actually you can work on things like locus of control and mindset and all of these things as young as 2, right? Now, mindset and inner coach is not going to go well with a 2-year-old, but you can start teaching them to be a problem solver, right? You can start teaching them limits and boundaries. So this really starts early, and then you're going to continue to build on your teaching. So again, you're going to have to keep it pretty simple. If I'm working on locus of control, for instance, with a toddler, all I'm working on at that moment is helping them take a step to solve a problem. So I'm asking them to help, right? They make a mess, they get the paper towel, so they start helping, right? They come up with ideas to help. but it's at a very simple level. And I'm going to just increase the complexity and the expectation as they get older on what I'm asking them to help with. So this starts very, very young. And self-regulation happens in infancy because these are when kids are learning to like delay gratification, for example, when they're waiting for feedings, right? So very early, they're developing these skills. Do you see a strong connection between locus of control and growth mindset? Do kids with internal locus of control often have a growth mindset? Yes. It was kind of hard to pull it apart. I mean, these certainly are the factors researched, but the fact is, yes. If you are someone who believes you change your circumstances, you are more likely to use your inner coach to do it, right? You're more likely to tell yourself, okay, I can handle this. I can do it. If you're the kid or the person who's, this is awful, this is a tragedy, I can't handle it, it's too hard, well, then you're also the person who tends to believe you're a victim more often. So they're very related. And the cool part is they build each other up. So, and that was the neat thing about all of these. If you help someone with mindset, you're probably going to help them with, locus of control or any of them. So that's such a big part of that. And then what suggestions do you have for middle-aged children who are struggling with finding talk? By the way, I work a ton with middle schoolers in high school on this one. So one of the things I do quickly is I ask them to start tracking for a week all of the things they say to themselves. And I ask them, typically by then I've already taught them the difference between reader, and I ask them just to listen to their own brain for about a week. And so just keep, write down anything in whichever column, coach, make a column for a self-defeater. Just write what you hear. I also normalize it pretty quickly by saying everybody has a strong inner critic voice. Like we all hear it. The question is, which voice do you listen to? I have them when they're struggling with, especially, I'm thinking a lot about high schoolers and adults right now, middle school would fall into this, would be when they are saying these very awful negative self-defeater comments to themselves, what I'll ask them is I'll say something along the lines of, what do you think your inner coach would say? And most of them actually hate their inner coach too, because it's hard for them to hear their inner coach. But they'll say, okay, well, they would say this. And then I'll ask them later to write down what their inner coach says and post it, because it takes so long for them to even hear their inner coach, much less believe their inner coach. And then there's something on social thing called the cycle of social success and social failure, spiral of social success and failure. And that's another great idea for kids that get stuck in this negative self-talk loop. So that's what. And then let's see. Do you have any strategies for encouraging positive self-talk? I think we just covered that one. I think I mentioned that one. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. I think I did answer that one. Okay. And then the next one is, how can you help older students make decisions? For example, the best high school I should attend. So that's a wonderful way of helping them to start problem solving their life. Big things would be like teaching them, what do you look for in high school? Pros and cons list. So asking them to create their own pros and cons list. Having them prioritize like what's most important about a high school versus what are the things that don't matter as much, like maybe, how pretty the building is. And really thinking about, and then also having them look at what are the things I need to be successful. So asking them that question and helping them have a discussion around like, what is it? If they are, someone who gets very overwhelmed by people and noise and they like things calm and structured, they're going to need to choose a high school that's a bit more calm and structured, right? I'm assuming they have a choice of private schools, but imagining that and allowing them to look through pros and cons, look through what's best for them, and then prioritize is a great way to do that. All right, how can we tell if it's personality or the lack of tools and skills? And I don't know what age you're thinking of. I think in the very early ages, I always assume lacking tools and skills, right? I have 2 children at home, and I'll just say this quickly and give you a quick example. One of them is ready for adulthood, possibly at the age of 13. She is responsible. She has everything together. She's very calm. It's very difficult to ruffle her. She's a very resilient kid, and I don't think I did much to help with that, but I created an environment where she could learn it, and it is pretty natural for her. The other child was not born as resilient. He is much more prone to anger. He gives up faster. He's the kid that starts to get really down on himself. He can go into victim mentality if I let him. And so what I would say is personality, you can't fully change their personality, obviously, and they'll grow and change a bit as they go on, but personality stays fairly intact. But what you can do is teach them tools regardless of their personality. So if he is quicker to anger, then I'm going to work with him very early on size of the problem. He's got to learn some tools to manage his emotions. And if that's his personality, that's okay. But I've got to teach him to get better about it. My son also has a horrible inner critic. So we've worked from birth on inner coach, I swear, because as soon as he started talking, I could tell it was happening. And that's personality. He is a glass half full or half empty kid, but I have to work constantly on what would your inner coach say. So I think it's both, but the fact is just keep working on it. All right, and then what can you do for students who are not motivated by grades? I see very many of these students. I think it's a tough one. This one's like just so difficult because it's so dependent on the kid and the family. I think one of them is question, as a family, your expectations and what's possible for the kid, because some students, school is very, very difficult. It's not what their brain makes easy. So I want to first assess, is what I'm hoping for my kid really possible? Now, I believe anything's possible, but I also have to match my students' strengths and talents with what I'm expecting of my child's. So first that. Second, I would ask them to start looking at what their goals are. And trying to figure out, what do grades get them? Because grades feel like an endless rat wheel. Is that the word? Rat wheel for many kids, because it feels like there's never enough. They just keep trying to make good grades and they don't get the reason why. So we've got to pair it to what's their goal, right? And the other part is what I mentioned about praising process, not the end result. On this one, if we continually praise, well, you made an A, great job, then they don't get it, right? Then that becomes it. So what we want to do instead is praise hard work, praise effort. So maybe stop focusing on grades and focus on effort. Did you just try? Did you put your best in, right? And so that's one way. But again, they've got to have a goal and they've got to have a carrot to work toward. I mean, I think, I don't mean like a prize. I mean like something they want to accomplish. And sometimes that helps, but you're going to have students who grades aren't their primary motivator. So in that case, I want them to be a hard worker. All right. And then do you have, let's see, oh Lord, do you have strategies for teaching middle school children to resolve conflict at home and outside, the home? And yes, I do. And it depends on who and where and all those things. But I think the biggest thing is when you're resolving conflict, the very first step is they have to define the problem. What's the problem? Second thing is they have to take perspective. So I've got to get them to think about, okay, what do I think and feel about the situation? And then what does the other person think and feel about the situation? And most of our kids that really get stuck in the conflict, they actually don't think about other people's perspectives, right? They're struggling with that. So I'm going to have them think about perspective, figure out, and then I'm going to have them start looking at what's my end goal here. I just taught this actually with adults of, if your end goal is to keep a friend, let's say the conflict is with a friend, but your end goal is to keep a friend, then you need to choose solutions that lead you toward keeping a friend. Telling them they're a big fat jerk and you hate their guts is not leading toward your goal, right? Gossiping around them all throughout the school is also not leading to your goal. So having them identify a goal, and then I actually ask them to identify whatever solutions they can, even if they're awful solutions, who cares? Throw them all down. And then I ask them, okay, if you do this solution, what's the likely result? What's the likely outcome of that solution? And then figure out the one you can live with. And then after that, it's trying, what's one small step you can do to resolve that conflict from the solutions you've chosen. That was a very long answer, but hopefully that helped. All right. How do you work with on older children who have external locus of controls? So I think it's all the things we've said today. It's working on their self-talk. It's helping them to figure out one small step they can do to change the situation. It's reframing it for them as adults. Instead of getting caught up, well, it's this person's fault, they did this, or I can't help it. looking at them going, well, this is actually a something that you can change. There's something you can do. Let's figure out the steps you can make. And I want you to figure out which one you're willing to make. And so it's just sitting down and lining out possible solutions and going, what are these things you're willing to try? And so, for example, the great example I gave at the beginning, that's okay, let's write down every small step you can take to change the situation. And so just writing them, not judging them, not telling them which one you think is best, because we want to as parents, but just lining them out and saying, okay, here are all the possible things you could do. Which one are you comfortable with at this point? And getting them to take a step. And unfortunately, that means you're going to take thousands of steps, because it's not going to be easy, but step by step by step, they can change this mindset.
Renee, let me just, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think
of course.
2 more questions left. So we're going to go ahead and let you finish up with those, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, perfect. And I know I'm going fast. Please rewatch the video if I missed anything or didn't explain it well. Okay, so how to help a toddler if he shows signs of resistance to what he should do and shouldn't do. How to help him when he did not get the toy or thing he really wanted. He chose a different toy or thing earlier than after spending time with his choice. Okay, he got into regret and then had a meltdown crying, no amount of talk or consult I did. How to help him overcome these things. Okay, so first of all, toddlers are absolutely unpredictable entities. So the biggest thing to know is that you will not win all the battles. So don't die on the bridge. Just know that toddlers are going to lose their mind on a regular basis. That is sort of who a toddler is, right? They're learning the sense of self-identity. They're struggling to understand this world around them. And so they are going to melt down. It is impossible. Every once in a while you get this amazing toddler that doesn't melt down. And then I always sort of giggle and say, well, you're getting it at 3 or 4, right? They're going to go through this phase. So just breathe, first of all. Second of all, I think setting boundaries, making sure that you're very consistent about the words you used and what you expect from them. So, and being okay with the crying. Sometimes it's okay, we're all done, and letting them have a turn. They're not great at negotiating. It's going to be very difficult at a toddler age to be able to work through all this. So at that point, it's just, we're all done. I know you're sad. And then letting them cry and being okay with it for a bit. Distracting also works great if we're talking 2s and 3s. Distracting them into something else is a great way to handle that, because they simply don't have the reasoning abilities to go deep with this, right? They get better and better at it. And by 3 and 4, you're going to make more success with the negotiating and those things. But a toddler needs meltdown, they need firm boundary, consistent words, then distract them and move on. And then let's see. And then what is the 1 or 2 things you would start with first of all those things for all of us that need small goals and changes? So that's a great question. I think that probably out of all the things I've mentioned, there's so many, honestly, but the 1 or 2 small things. First of all, let me say this first. Anything I've said today, if anything grabbed a hold of you and you thought, oh, I could do that, then that's where you start, right? You don't have to do it all. This is lots of ideas because there's lots of different situations out there and different ages, but the big thing is pick the 1 or 2 things that spoke to you, that you feel like you're capable of doing right now, and take that small change and then add more slowly. I would say that the biggest thing is giving choices, helping our students to make a choice, first of all, and then giving them, asking them to do something. As parents, retraining our brains not to want to take out of, to do everything for them. That's the one thing. And then the second thing I would say is be okay with struggle and failure. Your kids have to. They simply have to. And I know it's horrible and I know it hurts as a parent, but your child has to struggle to be resilient. They simply won't develop it without it. So as parents, I think the other thing is calm down, breathe, whatever you need to do to be able to let them struggle a little. Now there's a balance, of course. You don't overwhelm a kid with stressors, but you want to make sure that you're allowing some struggle for them to problem solve and try, take a small step, do something. But then you can come in and help when you feel like it's too much. And I think that's a balance that's different for every kid, but realizing that you've got to let them fail. They have to learn. So those are 2 things I would start with. But again, whatever spoke to you, try it and see where you go. So All right, Amy, I think it's all you now.
Well, it was really all you, and that was
Well,
so.
and I want to say thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm so honored that you all came to listen to me. And now I'll really hand it back to Amy.
Well, Renee, that was absolutely fantastic. And what I loved so much was the way that you brought it all together at the end and said, if there was one or two things that really you connected to and spoke to you, take that away and start there. And I think that's something that's palatable and something that we can all connect to. So thank you so much. It was such a wonderful webinar with you. We always love our time with Renee Attaway-Storer. So everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. And please stay tuned for our upcoming webinar with Jennifer Woody, and have a good night.